Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Once Upon a Time in Filibuster here on the Nerd Party, the podcast network that does for nerds what Tarantino does for foot fetishists. I'm your co-host Alice King, and back from making westerns in Italy, it's the Rick Dalton to my Cliff Booth. It's Lee Hutchison. How are you?
Yeah, good. I've come back with some nice extra thick sideburns from my adventures in Europe. So, yeah, I'm feeling on brand.
Good. So you were on holiday, but I believe recently you've been attending a few shows at the Fringe Festival rather than spending all your time in the cinema. What have you been catching there?
I know I'm really behind at the cinema at the moment. I continue to be thwarted in my attempts to see Hobbs and Shaw, which I hope I will be able to see this Sunday. But I've had a chance to kind of see a few shows at the Fringe, and I've got an interview to share, which is all the more exciting as well. So for people that are fans of kind of the nerd party, as it were, I have a sneaky feeling that some of them probably like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I was joined by Tom Lenk, who people might remember from, who played Andrew in the TV show. He was in the 6th and 7th season, and he has continued to go from strength to strength since Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and has made quite the presence for himself on social media. And he's become a bit of a regular face at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So I sat down with him just yesterday to talk about there's two shows at the festival. One is called Tom Lenk is Trash, and one which I imagine the title alone will get you, Dallas, Tilda Swinton answers an ad on Craigslist. So we sat down to talk with Tom Lenk about those two shows, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, content creators, and so much more. So hopefully you'll enjoy our interview for the next about 20 odd minutes, and then we'll be back. So enjoy. You're becoming a bit of a Fringe kind of regular now. I remembered when you came here with Nerdgasm a good few years ago, actually.
Yeah.
Boring trivia. You can see the back of my head in your Nerdgasm film as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I went to one of the dress rehearsals for some reason. But yeah, you're also becoming a bit of a Fringe regular now. And what keeps attracting you back to Edinburgh?
Well, honestly, after doing it, I've been wanting to come back and do the full. I regretted not doing the full Fringe that first time I did it. And, you know, because I hate the idea of like, oh, there's going to be empty houses or whatever. But, you know, after coming here last year, it just made me realize like this is such a great way to recharge yourself artistically and creatively, to be around all of this theater and all this comedy and alternative performance. And I had such a good time last year. And, you know, with Tilda, we were like, yeah, let's go back and do it again. And then I thought, well, I might as well do a solo show. I've done a number of those back at home. So I might make this my regular sort of vacation from LA to sort of recharge my batteries so I don't go dead inside the rest of the year.
Does it have much of a reputation among sort of like, we all know what it's like in the UK, so many people come up from England, London, everyone sort of descends here in Edinburgh. What's this kind of reputation in a place like LA, America, for performers like yourself? Is it something that's considered a goal, or is it that's just something that happens in Scotland?
Well, I will say it's definitely theater people back home. It's like this sort of holy grail thing, like, oh, you did the Fringe, and you always hear stories when you're in college, like, oh my God, so, you know, I remember my friend Danny Strong saying, when I was in college, we went and took Snoopy, or You're a Good Man, Shirley Brown, and he played Snoopy, and it was this big thing, and it's this built up thing. And so I think, but there's a number of groups here from LA that friends of mine have brought there. I think they saw how much fun we had last year, and they're like, oh, I want in on that. You know, I don't know if they were prepared for how much work it is, but so it's definitely a thing within like the theater community that people want to go do.
And how would you describe your new show? This is something brand new for Fringe audiences. How would you describe Tilda Swinton answers an ad on Craigslist?
Tilda Swinton, it's basically if Tilda was sort of a Mary Poppins character, and slightly magical. I mean, I guess she is kind of slightly magical, and she sort of swoops in and she comes in to sort of rescue this gay man from his depression and sort of changes his life around and it takes place in real time. So yeah, that's kind of the tagline for it.
How's your kind of creative process changed sort of since your first visit to Edinburgh a few years ago, something like Nerdgasm to now the Tilda Swinton show? How's your creative process changed over those kind of years for producing great Fringe shows?
Well, I think in that time, the thing I've been doing on Instagram took off, and it was a real lesson in just putting stuff out there and being creative and not worrying about the end result, and also not worrying about being perfect. And I think that's kind of one of the themes in Tilda Swinton, because she says, nothing's perfect except for me. Nothing's perfect except for me. I have a certificate. And so I've really sort of embraced. I just remember years ago, I've talked about this before, I had a talent manager who came and saw one of my solo shows that I did with my friend Kirsten Vangsness, who's here at the Fringe as well. And he said, no, you can't perform this. It's not, you need to refine it. It needs to be, rehearsed. It needs to be perfected. It's too rough around the edges. I remember saying yeah, but that's what I like about it. Like, what if that's just my thing? And he was like, no, you can't do that. Anyway, it's been nice to embrace the fact that, oh yeah, wait, that's my brand. Yeah. And it's been a fun thing to put out, because I think we're under so much pressure these days especially in the world of Instagram, where everything has to be perfectly lit and perfectly presented, and there has to be a color scheme to the grid and all that stuff. So it's really fun to say, oh, hey, and that's kind of the point of my trash show, is to just be like, it's not perfect and it's under-rehearsed and I'm just throwing it up there, but that's what's fun about. Are you still enjoying? Are you having a good time? Look how much fun you can have with something that's not perfect.
That's why I've always loved it. I remember when you first did it. I can't remember, it was some sort of event or something. I remember you posted it on Instagram, and I was like, that's really funny, because it was more sort of the creative side of that was a couple of hours ago at the Oscars or something like that. And in that time, he's picked that image, he's designed something, created something, put that on. And it almost takes you back to the sort of that kid enjoyment of how do we put something together really quickly and put on those kind of performances and plays. And
yes, oh my God, you get it.
And that made me so happy, because I was thinking, it's always marveled me since, because I thought, oh, that's funny, that's one time thing, that was cool. And it's always been a thing for a good few years now. And it's always that, it blows me away because it's done so quickly. It's not something that's, as you say, polished and stuff. It's how did it all do that? What's the creative process? I just marvel at it.
Well, and also there's been a number of copycats from me, and also I wasn't the first one to do. There's been Celeste Barber, there's some other people that were doing that. I didn't know about them when I started, because in some ways Instagram is isolated by the feeds that you follow and what country you're in, so I didn't know about them, and we're all a bit different. Hers is more sort of commentary on the original photo. Mine is too, but mine is more about I want to see how good I can make this. Sometimes it's just trash, but I really enjoy the process of how good can I make this out of the things I can find right here, right now. And that's the fun thing, I think. I've done talks about creativity now, sort of using the Instagram as a model, which is sometimes we do better when we're given a time limit. It's like Project Runway, what can you make here now with these ingredients, and put yourself under pressure? Because sometimes when you're hey, make something, create something, and you're but what? I don't know. Sometimes we do better when we're given a little assignment or some pressure put on. And I love that you picked up on that. It's because that's what it's all about. It's about going back to playing pretend, how we do this as kids, And I think the older you get, the more, the less inclined you are to take a chance and just put something up.
We're still not tactile enough, I think, these days and stuff. We pull clothes out, whereas you get the impression, something put there, glued there, stuck on that. how often do we get to play with our hands in that way as kids these days? Mostly it's going to be like, I'm uploading something. And I really enjoy that creative side.
Well, and in my solo show, I forced the audience to do a group craft. Hand out, my character Aileen hands out some supplies, and we make a craft together. And it's so fun to see people panic, to see people excel at it, to see people really fail at it. Because it really... And I think the point of it, that thing is to show us like, oh my God, these are things that any child can do. And in fact, I did have a child in the audience yesterday, and it was fun to see. The kid was just like sitting there making the craft before we even got to it. So it's like, in a way, you have to kind of remind yourself as an adult to get off your iPhone, get off your technology, and do something creative. But then get back on your phone and follow me on Instagram.
Yeah. Do you find that like a different generations of people are coming to see your shows, and find that you're saying like younger audiences there that might know you through, that's that Tom Lenk I follow on Instagram, or some people will go in, I know him from his guest appearance in TV shows or things like Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
It's been such a fun cross section. There's been people coming to see my show, and Tilda just because of Instagram, not knowing I was an actor before that. There's been a lot of Buffy fans. And then we'll just get like, theater fans who just like the title of the Tilda show. And now it's like people are coming to see me in Tilda, and then they're like, oh, well, I'll go see your solo show. So it's such a fun cross-section of people who are showing up.
Why Tilda Swinton? What is it, like you touched on her earlier, she's like Mary Poppins, special person. Why is she important to you? Why her?
Well, I didn't write the play. My friend Byron wrote it, and he's in the show as well. There's 4 actors in the show. He had named his dog Tilda Swinton because the dog is beautiful and strange. She has 1 eyeball. And so I think a little while after that, he had named her that. I think just got the idea to write this play. So it was kind of on. He has such a weird imagination, which I love. And he had sent me the script and wanted to know what I thought about just maybe doing a table read of it. And after I finally sat down and read it, I got to page 3 and I was like, oh yeah, we're doing this. And I knew that there was a theater in LA that had canceled a show, and I said, why don't we talk to them and see if we could just do it ourselves.
How do you prepare to potentially play a sort of Tilda Swinton kind of in that vein, that she's someone that you can never pigeonhole her, even a real life personality, it's quite hard to nail down who she is. She can go from something like Suspiria to We Need to Talk About Kevin to, children's entertainment, you never know who she is as a person. How do you prepare?
That's what's so fascinating about her. I'm not an impressionist, so for me, it's really sort of capturing the essence of her, or what sort of fascinates me about her personality. And because she's so different in every movie, I think audiences aren't totally aware of what is her real accent, what does she sound like. Yeah. And she's from Scotland, but I think she has that sort of posh, it's the RP, is that what they call it? The accent?
Oh, the Royal Shakespeare kind of...
Yeah, it's like, she went to private school in London, clearly. But she's so different in every movie, you're not really aware what she sounds like.
Even when she did a Scottish accent in Jim Jarmusch's recent film and stuff, you're like, that's not even her real Scottish accent.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. She's transformative, as they say. So it's fun throughout the play, she sort of pops in and out of her other performances, and I sort of do my best impression of her in those movies. But also, so I just watch a lot of clips of her, I watch her movies, I watch interviews with her. But then she's also, because to my American ears, she sounds very sort of Julie Andrews. Yeah. And it's a very Mary Poppins character, so I'm sort of incorporating that. I'm incorporating some Patsy Stone and some Edina Monsoon, but also some Joanna Lumley and some Jennifer Saunders. So it's sort of a combination of a lot of British female performers that I love.
much like kind of Tilda, you're not someone that can be pigeonholed. You've starred on TV, film, theatre. You create your own content. As you said, Instagram, you're a man for all seasons. Is that something that you always try and do with your career? Is you go, I want to put my hand at everything, or is it something that's just the way your career's kind of fallen for you?
I think it's just, you know, you can't really pigeonhole me, but in Hollywood terms, they do pigeonhole you, and sort of box you in. You know, you only do these parts, and I think it's different in the UK when you look at the leads of shows. They're not all, you know, supermodels.
Yeah.
And I think in the States, like, my thing that they box me into is, you're a sidekick, you'll be a supporting player. And so I think, you know, and that's great because you get to work on TV shows and movies, you earn a living, you get your health insurance. We don't have national health insurance, so that's how we get our health insurance. So, you know, and when I first started, like, that was so fun and exciting just to be a part of that. But as you grow as a performer and as an artist and as a professional, you realize, like, oh, this isn't creatively, artistically satisfying to just say, you know, hey, I brought you this report, sir, or hey, girlfriend, tell me about your problems. You know, that's very much you're servicing the other characters and you're servicing the story. So for me, all of these other things come from a need to stay creative and stay artistically fulfilled. And I think that's something that, you know, they don't tell you in school. And I think a lot of, you know, whenever, you know, I'm in a cab or, I don't know, like, people ask, oh, what do you do? You're an actor. Oh, I want to be an actor. Yeah, I want to do that. Yeah, that sounds fun. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, well, are you doing it currently? Oh, no, I'm thinking about, you know, getting into it, but I don't know how. And I always say, but you can be doing it anywhere, any city, wherever. You can be creating, you can be performing with friends, you can be doing a play. There's no, you don't have to be in LA or New York or London. You know, there's also now, like, filming is happening everywhere, but plays are happening everywhere. The improv groups are happening everywhere. So that's the kind of thing that I want to tell everyone. It's like, if you want to do it, you should just be doing it. Don't wait.
Even Instagram stories these days, that is a natural way to get kind of your story there. As you're saying, you don't need to be in LA. It's what room are you in right now? What can you do and bring things together?
Like, what stupid comedy video can I make given like, I'm in a hotel room this weekend, like, what can I make? And that's something, like, I want to make more of, you know, as the challenge has disappeared for now, I know how to make all the outfits. I want to get back to making more, you know, videos and comedy things, which is, you know, where I started. But certainly it's like a nice place to feel like, you know, I always wanted to, like, I want my own show. And I think, you know, specifically as an out gay person, you know, I'm very limited in what I'm allowed to do in Hollywood. And so I like to think of it like, well, I always wanted my own show. Well, I kind of have it, but it's kind of its own channel. Like, like, if I think about it in terms of, like, well, technology has changed so much. It's like, oh, I have my own channel and an audience, so I can just make my own stuff. And I have that. Is it the big money-making television show on an American network? No, but it's, you know, it's something completely different from that we didn't know to have the dream of when we were starting, because, you know, the internet hadn't been invented yet. So.
I suppose it's crazy to think when you think, you know, back to Buffy and stuff. That was a show I was a fan of as a kid. I loved your character as a, you know, someone that considered himself quite nerdy as well. It's like, oh yeah, those are my kind of guys. Would be that internet sort of period was like forums and stuff like that. And then, you know, people talk about the legacies of the shows and stuff like that. But time and technology, now we've got, like, you know, Instagram, all these sorts of different ways to tell kind of creative stories and content and stuff like that. And it's crazy to see how things have grown sort of since that show's been on the air.
It was so funny. I was thinking the other day, I'm like, ooh, Instagram stories. Storyteller. Oh my God! I created Instagram stories with that Buffy. I didn't, but that Buffy episode was all about just talking to the camera. It's interesting that they ended up calling Instagram story. Like, why is it called stories? But I was just thinking about that the other day.
I suppose what's kind of been the legacy of the show for you and stuff like that? It's something that people kind of know you for, and it's been nearly 20 years, I think it's been since it's finished. How does it feel kind of looking back on that and how things have kind of grown for you?
It's interesting because I know, like, some people are like just watching it for the first time. It's so funny how...
God, yeah, I never thought about that. People will be discovering you through Netflix and stuff. Here's me thinking like, oh, box sets, but anyone on the channel will be discovering that, and you're there till the bitter end.
And people are like showing I met this family from the Netherlands yesterday that happened to see a poster for my show, and they were in town. They came and they brought their kid and their baby, and they said they've been showing their 4-year-old Buffy and that he wanted to watch more. I'm like, well, that might be a little young, but yeah, it's funny that people are just discovering it. It's interesting because, you know, as an actor, you do a thing and then you move on, and you're constantly trying to get to the next thing. And it's so funny because, you know, people who love the show will continue to watch it, and like you're sort of in memory you're sort of frozen in time the way you looked and did things back then. So it is interesting to meet people because they have they expect you to be the way you were, 15, 20 years ago. So it's interesting because I've certainly changed and grown. But yeah, no, it's definitely, it's a cool thing to be a part of because it was such a, I think it paved the way for so many shows that we have today.
And I've spoken with like other creators that have had like comedy shows on Netflix or movies that have gone on there, and they're like, traditionally we'd have just advertised and you would have been just someone as, hi, I'm Tom Lenk, I was in an American TV show that you'll find on an American TV channel. But now people will find your show in Iceland, Australia, New Zealand, far-flung places, Timbuktu. And it's like, it almost becomes advertising that just is guaranteed there forever. And then when someone gets to a season 6 or 7 of your show, oh, that's Tom Lenk. Oh, I'm going to find out about him. And it's just this cycle of people kind of constantly feeding back into who are we and what is our material.
Well, it's so interesting because, like, people in other countries would have to wait years for the DVDs to come out. And now, like, my friend Kat Reitman has a show on in Canada called Workin' Moms, and it was only on, I can't remember how it worked. For a while, it was just being shown in Canadian Netflix and all that stuff, and then it finally got released internationally, and now, like, the newer seasons are out, and it is shocking to me the number of people that are sending me messages and saying, oh my gosh, I love you on Working Moms, but in like places I didn't even know were country, people are messaging me. So it's so cool how quickly people get to see it now, as opposed to the years that you would have to wait, back in the day to see Buffy or whatever.
Of course, and kind of finally for people that are listening to this that want to check out your shows, your Instagram content, where can kind of people find your shows and content out there?
You can always just find me on Instagram. It's sort of like my hub for everything these days, at Tommy Lenk. I'm actually, I know the world doesn't need another podcast, but I've been working on it over the past few months. I'm going to have the Tom Lenk's Trash Cast, and that starts with podcast 1 coming out in September. I haven't told anyone that yet, but since it's a podcast, I might as well.
Absolutely, I can't wait to hear that.
Yeah, and it's going to be where I ask people to bring 2 items, like one that they really treasure and one that's trash, but I have to decide which one's trash and which one's treasure. I love the sound of that. And it's just an excuse to talk to, interview people, celebrities, friends, comedians, and whatnot. So I'll be doing that in LA, but I'll be sort of traveling a little bit with it, and then hopefully doing some more live shows of trash. I'd love to do that some more. So we'll see. Hopefully I'll end up doing like maybe a little mini tour of that.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you so much, Tom.
Oh,
I really appreciate that. And yeah, hopefully you'll check out those shows. You can find the tickets to those shows in the show notes as well. So be sure to check them out and to follow him online as well. He's definitely one of my essential follows on there.
Absolutely, and we should probably try and get him onto the A24 project when Tilda Swinton finally arrives at one point, and to be a guest reviewer, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Cool. So, as always, each week here on Filibuster, we like to champion films directed by women as part of the 52 Films by Women pledge, and we each take a turn picking a film. And so, Lee, what have you chosen for us this week?
Yeah, I've picked one, sort of picking up on something we picked earlier in the year. So it was so good we picked it twice. People were a fan of Olivia Wilde's Booksmart, as we all were here on the show. But she's also an actress as well. She recently starred in a movie called A Vigilante. So this is one you can get on iTunes in both the UK and America. And it is available for DVD purchase here. And that's directed by Sarah Dagger Nixon. And Olivia Wilde plays a once abused woman who devotes herself to ridding victims of their domestic abusers while hunting down the one that she must kill to be truly free. So this is a really good mood piece, and quite a tense watch as well. So yeah, I would highly recommend that for people that are hooked on sort of Olivia Wilde as a director. This is definitely one of my favourite of the films that she starred in.
Fantastic. It sounds, I haven't seen this one, but it sounds just from the description similar to sort of the girl from the Spider's Web, but it sounds, from your review there, that it's probably a hell of a lot better than the girl from the Spider's Web was.
Yeah, absolutely. This one's a more low-key one, and I think it's all the better for it. So it definitely feels very much like a mood piece, and yeah, it's an interesting watch. One that I wouldn't recommend watching kind of late at night, but yeah, I think it's one to definitely check out.
Well, I'm going to go completely different tack for my pick this week, and it is Blinded by the Light by Gurinder Chadha, and this is a story based on the true life story of a young boy growing up in Luton who discovers the music of Bruce Springsteen, and it changes his life as he decides he wants to pursue his dream of becoming a writer rather than listening to his Pakistani father and becoming a lawyer or a medic or something like this. And it's very much of the time, it's the 80s detail is fantastic. It's spot on, but it's very, very cheesy, but done. It's pitched just perfectly that you cannot help but leave with a huge smile on your face and potentially a little tear in your eye rolling down your cheek at the end. It's potentially slightly cliche. It hits all the beats of a film where father and son are falling out and they need to mend their relationship towards the end. But the use of the Springsteen music and stuff is fantastic, and it's just a huge crowd pleaser, and I think it's doing really well at the UK box office, and I think it's making a wee splash over in America. It's released this week as well, so it's definitely one a feel good movie of the year, I think, candidate, and it's definitely one that people should check out if they can. Are you a fan of The Boss, Lee?
No, I'm not a big fan of the Boss myself, but I've heard so much kind of positive praise for this film, so this is another one that I'm hoping to check out soon.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan beforehand either. I knew like the big songs, but not a lot of his huge back catalogue. But it's basically, it has spurred me on to sort of checking it out on Spotify when I'm not listening to all the other Nerd Party podcasts, which are available on Spotify. I just want to point that out just now. So, on to this week's feature presentation, and it's a big one. It's Quentin Tarantino's 9th film, if you agree to completely disregard the fact that Kill Bill Volume 1 and Volume 2 were released as separate movies in the cinema, and it's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Is it Once Upon a Time ... in Hollywood, or is it Once Upon a Time in ... Hollywood? The poster and the trailers seem to have different views, but according to the BBFC certificate and the film credits itself, it is Once Upon a Time ... in Hollywood. And this is a story of a faded TV actor and his stunt double as they strive to reignite their careers in the film industry during the final years of Hollywood's golden age in 1969 Los Angeles. But their lives could be changed forever when Sharon Tate moves in next door. Now, Lee, tell me, what are your initial thoughts sort of going into the film, and what were your thoughts coming out after first watch?
Yeah, this was one that I'm a big fan of Quentin Tarantino. I say that in the respect of, like, he's similar to kind of maybe people like Christopher Nolan, Lynn Ramsey to an extent, is that they are very picky about the projects that they do, that they'd release. And when a movie of theirs comes out, it's an event. It's like, oh my God, has it been 2-3 years already? Here we are with the next film. And Tarantino is definitely one of those ones that I will be there opening weekend to see it. But this one, the trailers hadn't blown me really away. I wasn't that fussed about them, to be honest. I would watch them and go, that looks good, looks interesting. But I was always kind of had in my mind I was looking forward to it. And sort of then in the kind of coming the weeks, sort of it's been about nearly 3-4 weeks since it came out in America, the buzz has continued to increase. I've avoided reading any of the reviews, don't care to hear what they say before I see it, but I couldn't escape that there was lots of positive praise coming out for this film. You know, there was obviously some criticism and issues that I was made aware of, but this was one that made me think, oh my God, this might be better than the trailers kind of had maybe led me on to believe. So by the time I got around to seeing it on Friday, I'd kind of got back from my holiday on Thursday. I'd been out a day already. I had to do 3 loads of washing, so it was impossible for me to go see it there on the Thursday, so I had to wait the Friday. And my ticket to see in 35mm, I had that a couple weeks ago. So I was really hyped for it. It was like an event cinema for me. So kind of going in, I must say I came out of it really, really happy. And you know, there's not many films I've seen repeat viewings this year. I've seen Avengers Endgame a couple times because I saw that with a bunch of friends and then I went to see it with my partner. But this is one I really want to go see again, and I just really want to be back in that world. And I loved how the film made me feel. I like how the film didn't take me in a direction I expected it to go. I just thought it was such an enjoyable film to watch, and one that there was a scene I'm sure we'll go into later on that just had me like smiling from ear to ear, and a couple moments like that had me in the film, and it was just such a special experience. This is what it is about to go to the cinema, and to see it in 35mm. I know people have the choice of seeing it in IMAX, which I kind of want to see it in next, kind of plain old digital. The 35mm just added to the whole experience. And you know, sometimes you see films that are shot on film and you think, oh, it's just done for the sake of it or artistic vanity. For this, it really complemented the film and really added to the character of it all. I just thought it was one of the best films of the year.
Interesting, because I have to admit I am slightly more muted on the film than most people. I think certainly a lot of people I've seen on Letterboxd and stuff have been giving it sort of 4.5, 5 stars, and you know, I was looking forward to it going in. I think, like you say, I think the marketing of the film has not been the best. You know, when you think back to sort of like the trailers for like Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill and stuff like that, the trailers were not as good. I think probably the best trailer was the one that started off with the sort of fake interview in sort of black and white, and then had the sort of the scene where the girl's telling him it's the best acting she's ever seen and stuff like that. I thought that was a good trailer. The rest of them have been kind of interesting in that they're sort of trying to push it along certain ways, and it, of course, the film does not go the way that it's meant to go. We're going to talk about that in a bit once we get to spoiler territory, because Tarantino made this whole thing it can about he didn't want it spoiled. You know, this was coming off the back of the Avengers thing, but I can understand why you wouldn't want people to talk about this actively, because it is such a huge departure for things, but we'll get into that in a bit. But I mean, I was enjoying it. I thought the characters were fantastic. It was nice to sort of spend a long time in that world, but it did feel very episodic. There were scenes. I've already heard that, you know, Django Unchained, no, not Django Unchained, Hateful Eight was released on Netflix as almost like a mini series of 8 parts and stuff like that. I could see this film easily being edited into like a mini series where you would have certain sections. So you'd have Rick Dalton's Western sort of filming as one section. You'd have Cliff Booth's visit to the Manson family ranch as another episode, and perhaps that might make it feel a bit more complete or something. It did feel almost like a film of 2 halves or 2/3 and a final third, where it was certainly taking its time immersing you in this world. And to be fair, the period detail is absolutely fantastic. You feel like you're in 1969 the entire time. I think, like you say, the 35mm, I saw it on 35mm as well, and the sort of grit and sort of, it wasn't that crisp, clean digital feel. It felt of the time and of the period, and I think watching it from an actual print helped in that as well. But there was just something that didn't really connect with me and I'm not sure what it was. I think I need to see it again, but I'm not sure if I want to see it as like a mini series or as a film again. But I think there was just something that didn't really connect for me as well. And there's been a few people, sort of, I think Wendy Ide had a great review in The Guardian about it, that this is a view of Hollywood's, well, for Tarantino's, he says this is the golden age and it kind of goes downhill after that. But for me, the 70s are basically produced some of the finest films ever made. So I think the 70s are the finest period of Hollywood sort of filmmaking. But yeah, no, there's just something didn't click entirely for me. But you didn't have any issues with that. There wasn't. You were just happy to be immersed in the world and for it to take its time. And
yeah, there was a couple of times where I maybe just had a glance at my watch or something like that. Maybe it was just my bladder that was trying to speak to me. But yeah, I really enjoyed being in that world. I just found the characters, I don't know, I thought, I was sort of thinking when I was watching it that I'm so used to Tarantino films that every scene is filled with like machine gun style dialogue. It just completely just dominates the entire scene. That the best thing in it is in a lot of Tarantino films is that dialogue, that razor sharp wit, that influence that is just in every bit of dialogue. And you could probably buy the script for something like Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, you name it, and just go through the script. Oh, look at that reference, that idea, and so on. Whereas what I really liked about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was that I could settle into it and just watch things unfold. That people are just driving around listening to the radio, giving the thumbs up to hitchhikers, going around their work, walking around the set, and it didn't feel the need to be filling every bit of that film with dialogue, with something going on. And I just liked being in that world and just watching these interesting characters go around their jobs, feel whatever emotions they were going through, whether it was just getting on with their lives or whether it was frustrations with their career. And I just thought that was really interesting, and I rarely ever felt the time drag at all. I did feel sort of in the third act, I found it a little jarring when sort of that was changed a little bit and we had a narrator drop in to sort of kind of put the second and third act together. I could have done without that, to be honest. But this was just a kind of couple of characters in an old world that I quite liked being in. The attention to detail in terms of the radio, the TV, that I just think it was just an incredibly well made film, and I just loved watching it and seeing sort of a master at work, and in a way that we know Tarantino is a great visual director and his homages and stuff, but often, as I say, that dialogue can dominate it. But with this, it just felt like we had got something where it just got to showcase perhaps a more mature side of Tarantino.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a more mature, you could say almost grown up Tarantino, in that it isn't always relying on like the swearing and stuff like that to pepper through the dialogue, although there is a lot of swearing in it. And I did see one rather odd criticism of this is a Tarantino film, it's to be expected, but somebody basically said that there was too much swearing for a 1969 film. People wouldn't have sworn as much at that time, and it's like, it's a Tarantino film. I mean, come on, he's got dramatic license. I mean, he takes huge dramatic license with certain things. I think we can allow him a bit of slack for that. But I mean, yeah, Robert Richardson's cinematography as well. He's worked with Tarantino now for the last couple of films, and I think he's found like probably his best sort of cinematographer to work with on this now. They're really sort of coming up with some fantastic looking visuals. Some people weren't as keen on Hateful Eight. I really enjoyed it, but the look of the film was fantastic, especially sort of seeing it on like 70mm as well. Robert Richardson really knows how to use film as a medium to tell the story, and it's all right there. I mean, I think the strength of the film is definitely in the lead relationship between Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth, who are played superbly by DiCaprio and Brad Pitt. I mean, Brad Pitt he sort of almost resembles like a young Robert Redford in this, with his haircut and stuff like that. And there was a scene basically where he takes his shirt off, and I was like, oh my. And it's like, it's like I'm having feelings I should be having here. I mean, and a lot of people have been like, this guy is 55, and it's like, he does not look 55 in this film. And DiCaprio has just gone from strength to strength for me. From, I think it was Catch Me If You Can, and Django Unchained was one of his finest performances. And then it's almost got this meta scene where you're watching Leonardo DiCaprio playing an actor playing a scene essentially almost like Calvin Candy in it, and it's just like bizarre to watch, but you're just completely drawn in by his performance. I think it's fantastic, and I would have basically liked like the whole film to just be about them. I think, like you say, when this stuff comes in with like Kurt Russell narrating the film, even though he's not really a huge part of the plot, he plays a stunt coordinator on a film and stuff like that. And I think the problem for me is, again, sort of coming, it's Tarantino doesn't know when to kill his babies, if we can say that. Where when it comes down to the editing, up until sort of Inglourious Bastards, apart from Death Proof, each film was utterly fantastic. But then, sadly, when Sally Menke died, other editors have come into his films, and it almost feels like they have butted heads with Tarantino, and he hasn't been able to find an editor who's willing to basically stand up to him and say, you really need to sort of trim these things down. And I feel that there could have been a lot edited out that wasn't, or like it's sort of change into this episodic nature where you can allow these sections to play out almost as sort of like TV episodes and stuff like that. But as a whole, I think the problem is that you're going on this nice sort of languid pace, so spending time with these characters, really getting to know them and into the story, and then the final third feels very sort of frenetic and highly charged and sort of fast paced compared to the rest of it. It feels out of kilter. I mean, perhaps maybe that's what he was going for, but it just felt almost too jarring for me, sort of going into the final third. But I mean, and also there's bits like where it's odd, but to think of Family Guy, there's a lot of use of sort of cutaways in this, about where in Family Guy it'd be a cutaway, it'd be like a 30-second gag and going back to it. Here you get sort of almost 5-10 minute scenes before it cuts back to the main plot, and it almost sort of takes you out of it. And I found that sort of slightly frustrating, that he didn't know when to say no and edit down certain scenes. That was probably me the biggest frustration, and that was certainly something I felt on Django Unchained and Death Proof as well.
Yeah, I think I listened to, I don't know about you, but I've always thought, like, this is an aside, I've always thought it'd be quite fun to do, like, a podcast, like, I'm talking, like, not a one-off episode, but, like, another podcast. I've got all these many ideas in my head, where it'd be like, I would love to do a podcast about, the Unit Beverly Cinema that is owned by Quentin Tarantino, where the podcast goes, what films are on that week, and we pick like one or two and talk about the films that are on there. I've had a similar idea for the Prince Charles Cinema in London and the Music Box in Chicago, where it's just like, we can't always go to these incredible cinemas, but what happens if we take their programming and watch it at home? But there is definitely a podcast about the New Beverly one, so I listened to one. They do a New Beverly calendar podcast where they get Tarantino on, and they had his film editor on this week, Fred Raskin, and it's this really good podcast. It's all talking about how he got his break in film editing, working with Sally Menke, and that they went on and did Fast and the Furious 3, 4 and 5. He tells a funny story about Quentin Tarantino trying to cram all the Fast and Furious movies before going to see Fast and the Furious 6 or something like that, as he kind of is emailing Fred Raskin all about how does this timeline work, all etc. So so basically, long story short, Fred Raskin was sort of talking about his experiences, how they shot like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and there was like a scene where they were sort of like trying to get it cut down, sort of just in the last stretch, and he talked about like Tarantino had this moment. It's like, I want to take this relatively huge section. I think it was that they were working on a pilot or something like that, and like he wanted this bit cut out, and it helped the film flow much better. And then Fred was like, oh yeah, that is a brilliant idea, let's remove that. And that kind of fed into my idea of like, some of the debate about the addition of Fred Raskin to his editing, is that it maybe feeds into the idea of, is this guy actually someone that can stand up to Tarantino and make those choices and decisions, or is it actually Quentin Tarantino is the film editor, and someone like maybe Fred Raskin stitches together the assembly cut and is there to provide some sort of reassurance or feedback? it's quite interesting. It was just a little telling story in that podcast, and still definitely well worth a listen.
No, I'll definitely have to check that one out. So, I mean, this is a Tarantino film, so it's as expected. We see regular Tarantino sort of actors come back into the fold for little cameos here and there. In terms of the performances, were there any in particular that stood out for you?
I think it's one of these ones for me. I'm going to sound boring. I love Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio in this movie. It's one of my favorite Brad Pitt movies. I mean, I really like him as an actor, and there's been performances where I thought, oh, that was really good, but this one just seemed effortless, and I thought that was so awesome. I thought Margot Robbie in such a small role, I really liked that one as well. Just that scene of her watching herself in the cinema was just really lovely to watch, and just that, I guess that's what it must be like when you make it, whether it's one level or not, and you can see people responding and reacting to your thing. I just thought she nailed that, and I thought it was just so lovely to watch. I could have watched a real time film of, probably similar to, remember when Shia LaBeouf watched all his films in the cinema and we screened that. I would watch a cut of like Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate watching that entire film.
I thought that was a great thing. I mean, there's a lot of criticism come down on the film, particularly on not Margot Robbie's performance, but almost the lack of Margot Robbie in the film, because she's such a huge name that she is third billed, but it is a very sort of small part, because she's sort of like this minor character who happens. She's sort of, there's this driving narrative. If you know your history, and the Manson family murders and stuff like that, which potentially are not a lot of people in the UK maybe up to date on it, unless they're currently watching Mindhunter season 2, which also features the same actor who plays Charlie Manson in that film as well. So if you're not au fait with it, you're maybe not entirely sure where it's going, but there's this inevitability there. It's heading towards that, and I thought that she did a really good job of creating this presence in the film without too much dialogue and stuff like that. And like you say, the scene where she goes to the cinema to watch herself, and it's like, I'm on the poster and stuff like that. That was lovely to see. Although I have to say, I can't believe that Tarantino, as a cinema owner, should know better than this, but it's all down to his fetish, I think. But he commits the most unforgivable cinema etiquette breach I've seen in a long, long time, and that is by having Sharon Tate put her bare feet up on a cinema seat in the cinema. And I was just like, oh, no, can't do it. That was just, it almost took me out of the film there. And again, there was another scene where a woman puts her feet up basically on the front window of a car, and it's just like, I'm just thinking feet. It's just like the Tarantino thing. It's just like I couldn't do anything apart from watching these feet at that particular moment in time. It took me out of it. It's like that scene in Austin Powers when he sees a mole on the face and he's like, mole, 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 mole. I was just like, feet. Yeah. So yeah. But I think Margot Robbie was great in the film. It was just that one particular moment, I was like, oh, no. I can't believe she's done that. It's worse than a mobile phone, I think.
Yeah, I guess so. I suppose one thing that we can be grateful for was, I would rather someone had their feet up in the cinema than what they were doing in that days of smoking in the cinema. So I'm gonna take the feet up, as I could handle that more than someone
really
smoking.
Bare feet in the hot LA sun.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, I just hate the smell of smoke.
Well, yeah.
It makes me gag.
Yeah, I'm glad that they've got rid of all that sort of stuff from the cinemas. So I guess this brings us, I think it's a good time, talking about Sharon Tate, to move into what is essentially spoiler territory. So if you haven't seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood yet, press pause, go and see it, and come back, because we're going to sort of dive into the ending here. So are they gone? They're gone. Okay, fine. So we're going to talk about the ending. So, like you say, we've sort of said that the film is sort of made up of one big section, and then the sort of final third is dealing with one particular night in August of 1969. And I had a feeling that when they said that this movie, they couldn't talk about the ending and stuff, it was going to go a certain way, and it kind of went the way that I thought it was going to go, in that Tarantino once again revises history, as he did in Inglourious Bastards, which is what I thought he was going to do here, and almost to the point where I saw the trailer where Leonardo DiCaprio is playing a Nazi hunter in a movie. I thought, wow, they've actually, in this timeline, they've made a movie of Inglourious Bastards and what happened in that. So it's almost become canon. Of course, that wasn't technically true in the movie, but in this movie, it turns out that the Manson family at last minute target Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth in their house because Rick Dalton comes out and gives them shit for interrupting his night trying to make frozen margaritas and to get off his driveway. And so they decide to go back in, and then it becomes an over-the-top sort of revenge horror film in that the violence is so incredibly over the top, and I'm not sure how it played with your audience, but basically it almost became a comedy at that point. Did it play that way with your audience?
To an extent. I think it's one of those ones. There was laughter, but I think it's awkward laughter of like, oh my god. It's like, I think it's because we expect violence in Tarantino films, and many of the times we can be introduced to that very quickly. But this is almost like over 2 hours into it before like it properly explodes. And it's just like that tension has been building and building, perhaps that expectation of violence. And it's that moment when it is unleashed, it is just unbridled. And I was like myself, like, you know, but not in a way I was like laughing at it, but more just sort of like that natural reaction that you can sometimes get with uncomfortable violence.
Yeah, no, I think it was almost like a release or something. There was a lot of laughter, and I think it was just in that the comedy of it. It wasn't just like someone got their head smashed into a table. It was multiple times and stuff like that. And it's like this sort of Brad Pitt, Cliff Booth stunt character who there's a running gag in the film about, well, you know, he killed his wife and stuff like that. And basically he becomes like this Superman sort of capable of taking down all these people, you know, with the help of a very, you know, handy, you know, sort of a staffy dog as well that, you know, steals that scene as well. And it's basically just like, you know, Tarantino changing history into the fact that basically these two, you know, jobbing actors basically managed to stop the Manson family, which means that Sharon Tate survived, that whole house survived, she went on to have a kid. It does raise some interesting questions about that timeline, about obviously with Sharon Tate not having died, then Roman Polanski probably wouldn't have done certain things that he did later on, which kind of revises that, which I think some people have an issue with as well. It potentially means that Rick Dalton could have starred in Chinatown and stuff like that. So what did you make of the ending and how it went? And because I was expecting it to potentially continue on past the point that it did, to sort of show what would have happened to Cliff and Rick, you know, becoming almost these sort of Hollywood heroes of stopping the Manson family and stuff like that.
I think for me, I kind of tried to keep myself in a bubble with this film, that I was aware that Tarantino had written the letter not to spoil the film. And when things were, like through the whole film, I was like, that this young, brilliant actress, she's going to get it. She is going to be killed. And it's just a case of when, not if. And when sort of it happened, that I started to realize, oh, they're not going to do that. They're doing this sort of split history moment, similar to kind of Inglourious Bastards. I kind of needed to sit on it for a little while, because I was immediately thinking, well, I can see why that would really piss people off. Not perhaps on a creative decision, but perhaps on a level of, this was someone that was brutally murdered, but she didn't brutally die in this one, and things kind of lived happily ever after. But I kind of sat on it, and I really liked it. I think it ties into the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood aspect of it, that this is sort of a fantasy world. This is a bit of a Hollywood fairy tale. And I really liked that, to be honest, at the end, that it went somewhere a little bit different. And until that credits kind of kicked into sort of the Red Apple cigarettes advert, I honestly thought, oh, what's going to happen next? Is there someone, maybe they're going to go in the house and there's still some Manson killers in there? Nope, that was it. And I really enjoyed that. I thought it was an interesting decision, and whether that's right or wrong, that the idea of this sort of Sharon Tate character is almost a complete red herring. And I think it was an interesting decision to go that way, and one at this moment I think was quite a clever one.
No, I'm still sort of going back and forth on the whole thing and on the use of Sharon Tate, because they've gone in such a different direction. I'm almost sort of like, if they hadn't had the Sharon Tate thing in it, if it had just been a movie about these two actors and sort of best buds and stuff like that, who just happened to cross paths with the Manson family, would that have almost been as good a movie, if not different? I understand why he's done it, and as far as I'm aware, he had the blessing of relatives of Sharon Tate and whatever to go down that particular route, because I don't think he would have done it I don't think he would have been that insensitive to just plow ahead with it if he hadn't done it. But because it's certainly not the ending that people will expect for that with the Manson family, especially given how maybe over the top it is compared to like the other scene where they feature them. That ranch scene for me is probably one of the best scenes of Tarantino recently. I thought it reminded me of the scene in Zodiac, where Jake Gyllenhaal goes down to the basement of that film projectionist and he's like, is there someone else in the house and stuff like that. Just the gradual increase of tension throughout the whole thing as Brad Pitt's character is at the ranch and like wants to go into the house to see this old guy, and you're thinking something really bad is going to happen here. And I just love the way that whole scene played out. I thought that was masterful in terms of the direction and the filming and the editing of that particular sequence. I thought it was possibly one of the best sequences of the film, but I understand why he probably had to go the way that he did towards the end to get that sort of cathartic release. And there was a payoff to an earlier gag that is similar to sort of Chekhov's gun. If you see a gun in the first act, it's going to be fired by the end of it. Just like the acid-tipped cigarette comes back to pay off, there's a payoff with another item, which I'm not actually going to spoil because it's too good. It got like a round of applause when it happened in the audience. It involves Leonardo DiCaprio's character at the swimming pool. It just played like gangbusters at that, and it was just a huge sort of payoff for that. And I did love that particular bit. So as we sort of come to the end of the thing, do you have any sort of final thoughts on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Yeah, I want to ask about one particular scene and what your take on it was. Or I suppose I've got two questions. Kind of, what was your take kind of on the Bruce Lee scene that seems to be also generating quite a lot of controversy? Yeah,
that was one where I think it was all because I'd almost heard more about that particular scene than anything else in the movie by the time I'd gone to see it. You'd seen just a couple of bits and you're thinking, like, really, would Brad Pitt's character really have been able to take him down? I noticed that the fight was left at 1-1, so there was that. It wasn't like Bruce Lee got his ass handed to him, but it was very stereotypical in certain ways. And I can understand why it was done that way, because these are all sort of heightened versions of people in Hollywood or stereotypes. These sort of Rick Daltons and Cliff Booths are clearly inspired by real characters from Hollywood and stuff like that, but just taken to a heightened edge. So I can understand why he did it. It didn't necessarily sort of upset me as much as maybe other people, because I kind of could see where he was going with it. But I can understand why people would be upset with it, because I've seen, I think it was it called Dragon, the Bruce Lee story back in the early 90s with Jason Scott Lee and stuff. So I've seen that movie about him and his time on the Green Hornet and his performance as Kato and stuff like that. So it's problematic, but it wasn't as problematic for me as maybe for others. What about yourself?
I thought it was one of the highlights of the movie for me. I just thought I just found it so funny, to be honest. And I think like it was this idea of like Bruce Lee. I don't know how much of it is drawn from life or anything, so I won't comment on that. But I just thought of it, right? Okay, I'll accept if this is Bruce Lee as it is. Okay, I'll accept it within this film. I'm open to people telling me completely otherwise. But I just found it such an interesting kind of character, and that if you're one of these guys that are just, one of the best in the world, and how much of it is true, I've heard some debate that it's Cliff Booth sort of fantasizing and kind of having a bit of a different memory about how it went down. I just thought like the delivery from Brad Pitt was so good, and I thought Mike Moe as Bruce Lee was also really good. I just thought it was just two great actors. Sort of, it wasn't just sort of even physically going toe to toe, but as actors and characters, I thought it was just really great to watch that unfold, and just the delivery of even things like, what happened to my car? Oh, I put the guy through it. It was just, I just thought it was a well-constructed scene, and I could almost picture it one day being sort of like a YouTube video in itself of like the Bruce Lee scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it just cranking up the numbers. I just thought it was a really good moment in the film.
Yeah, no, and it was nice to see Zoe Bell, sort of the stunt double of Uma Thurman in Kill Bill, and appearing in Death Proof, back in a role, keeping her New Zealand accent as well. And of course then we had other sort of family members turn up. Maya Hawke turning up at the end as one of the potential sort of Manson family murderers who decides that she can't go through with it. And I'd seen Stranger Things, the entire series of Stranger Things 3, with Maya Hawke in it, not realising that was Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman's daughter. But now that I know that, when I see her, it's like, it's almost impossible to not see Uma Thurman in her. It's just like, I can imagine that, I think I pitched it on Twitter at some point, that if they do Kill Bill Volume 3, where the character of Vivica A. Fox's daughter grows up and kills the bride, and then Bibi, the bride's daughter, tries to kill that daughter, I could see it totally being like Maya Hawke and Zendaya sort of going one-on-one, and I'm down for that film. If that wants to be Quentin Tarantino's final film, as he says, he's only got one more. If it was Kill Bill Volume 3, I would take that. Of course, we could potentially have a Tarantino Star Trek. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Like, there's no way in hell that he is directing the Star Trek movie, and I'm totally okay with that. But the idea that he has contributed a story to the Star Trek universe, and it's now, there's a script out there from the guy who did The Revenant, Mark Smith or something along those lines. It's out there. I think the good news for Star Trek fans is that CBS and CBS All Action and CBS Action and Viacom have merged back together again. So Star Trek movies and Star Trek TV shows can sort of be back together again, which is very long and complicated to explain, but I think it makes it more likely now that we can get a Quentin Tarantino Star Trek story, which is all the more exciting for me. But the one thing I want to just ask you is, like, I think it's one of my favourite scenes of the entire year, is the scene where Trudy, the young actress, compliments Rick Dalton's acting as like, that's the best acting I've seen ever, and just like DiCaprio's reaction to that. I know it's like become a gif thing that's just nailed, but I thought that was one of the most charming, sweetest films, and like something that cute and lovely in a Quentin Tarantino film. It was just magic. I had the biggest smile on my face at that one. What did you think of that scene?
No, it was a fantastic scene, because the whole sort of scene leading up to it, where he sort of shows how good an actor he can be, and it is probably the best acting that Rick Dalton does in the whole movie. So therefore, I think it's a valid point that she gives. I mean, hey, but she's only 11. Who knows how much acting she's actually seen? But I thought he really sold that moment, and I know it has become a bit of a gif. I mean, and a meme. I've seen like the Star Is Born one, where it's got when Cliff Booth's like looking at the car and he like calls him back, and it's just like, hey, what? Just wanted to get another look at you. And then Rick Dalton's just like giving him the thumbs up and stuff like that afterwards. So this film will be meme worthy. Certainly by the end of the year, there'll be plenty out of it. But I thought I could imagine that scene, if they nominated Leonardo for an Oscar again for this film, I think that'll be the scene that gets the clip. Although I think out of the two, I would almost go with Brad Pitt getting the nomination of it. I thought he was just superb in this film.
Yeah, I think we'll keep coming back to it. He is so good in this. They're all good in this film. I really want to go like finish this, edit it, and then go back to the cinema. Yeah, no,
I think having chatted with you, I think it's definitely one that I think I probably will go back and rewatch it again, just to get my thoughts clear on it. I might be more positive on it, but sadly I'll have to watch it in digital, because that's all I've got up in Aberdeen. But like you say, I mean, you saw it on 35mm. It was at the Cameo in Edinburgh. Was there a bigger crowd for that screening than other ones? Do you know what the audience has been like for these 35mm screenings in Edinburgh?
I think so, because I'll assume that people have the choice of seeing it in digital and IMAX in one of the Cineworlds here, but we have two cinemas showing it in 35mm. So like my screening was half full, so it was like 5 o'clock on a Friday, and a warm Friday at that. But it's very rare that you get two of the cinemas here showing it in 35mm. So it was kind of, they might cannibalize the audiences a little bit from each other. But I know plenty of friends that have gone along to see it in 35mm, and I think I think it really added to the experience for me. And I think it's the fact that two cinemas are showing one of the biggest films of the year in 35mm here in the capital is something to be applauded.
So yeah, I think it's great to see these sort of films getting a 35mm print release. It's very rare these days. Basically only directors like Quentin Tarantino, Christopher Nolan, and occasionally sort of Paul Thomas Anderson have the clout and the weight to really sort of drive these new releases. Otherwise, you're just looking at old sort of rep theaters screening old classics on 35mm. But I think there is a movement towards that these days. It's 35mm is also almost becoming the sort of vinyl of film watching, that the purists will go out and champion these screenings. And what we've got now is a quick interview that I conducted just before the release of Once Upon a Time with Hollywood with Cieran McCusker, who is a projectionist at the Dundee Contemporary Arts Theatre, and he also runs the Twitter account Analog Film Scotland, and he likes to promote 35mm, 16mm and 70mm screenings around Scotland. So I spoke with him about his journey to the projection booth and what it meant for him to screen Tarantino's latest, and I spoke to him while he was in the projection booth, so you will hear a bit of background noise, but hopefully you'll enjoy the quick chat that we had with him. So you've run the Analog Film Scotland account on Twitter for a number of years now, sort of highlighting 16mm, 35mm and 70mm screenings across the country. Why did you feel it was important to do this?
I started it because I was getting into film and starting to realise what 35mm was and how it was different from digital. And I would occasionally end up going to 35mm screenings without knowing beforehand that it was going to be on format. So it was a sort of response to cinemas, most cinemas really not advertising that they were even showing 35mm. It was sort of when I think everyone was like, oh, digital's going to be the way forward, and at the time they weren't even really getting any known films for Tarantino films on 35 and stuff on. I certainly remember a huge thing about Django Unchained being on 35. So it was around about that time. And as I said, I was just getting frustrated that none of the cinemas were advertising that they were showing this stuff. So it was in response to that. And then I thought, well, I might as well just try and go around and see what I can dig up from each cinema. And if cinemas don't want to advertise it themselves, then I'll.
Do you remember, was there a particular moment or a particular film that sort of got you interested in projection and sort of 35mm?
Not a particular screening, but I remember it was when Mark Kermode used to run in vlog, and I remember he did an entry about 35mm. It must have been about 2012 or 13, around about then. And before that, I'd been aware of it, but never really noticed it that much. And following that, I remember going to see a screening of Die Hard at the GFD. It was one of the Christmas ones, and I was just excited to go and see it. I didn't know what format, because again, they didn't advertise it. But when it came up on screen, I immediately recognised it on 35mm, and I think after that point, I never really looked back, as it were. So around about then, that was when I started to really start to take notice.
I think we first met when you sort of popped into the Belmont one time when you were up in Aberdeen, and I was a projectionist for a few years then, and you had an interest in projection. I took you around the projection booth, but fast forward a few years and you're now a fully trained projectionist working in his dream job. Can you sort of tell us about your journey into the booth, so to speak?
I started at the Grosvenor Cinema in Glasgow, just as front of the house. And actually, I got that job because I helped them lifting their own 35mm projector around at an outdoor screening. And then a couple of months later, I got a job just because I've registered my interest. And since then, I've pestered the projectionist, had a diploma. Then I moved to the Cameo, and I've pestered people there. And I've pestered the projectionist at Filmhouse as well, but they run so much, 35mm, 70mm. So I got a lot of experience just doing bits and bobs here and there, really, just out of the kindness that people would give me to help me show a few things. And then this advert for DCA came up at the end of last year, and I went, yeah, it was only part time when it was advertised, but I said I have to go for it, and I got it. Later on, got offered full time, and here we are, almost just under 2 weeks away, running my first ever full run on 35mm. It's quite, yeah, it's been quite a journey, I guess, and I'm extremely lucky I've ended up at this point. Extremely grateful.
I know, because it seems to be somewhat of a dying art form these days, and when I was learning it, this was probably around about sort of 2007 that I did, and this was probably just before the sort of full sort of almost changeover where most cinemas were almost going fully digital, and people almost don't seem to understand these days what the job of a projectionist used to be, where you would have 3 to 4 screens where you would be having to run every single screen. You'd be starting the ads in one, you'd then be going down, lacing up the next one, coming back, changing over to the film and stuff like that. And it was a full-time job, but it's become more of a skill. And people used to say that projection was the beating heart of the cinema, and a cinema without a projectionist is one suffering from heart failure. Why do you think it is so important for cinemas these days to still retain the position of a projectionist, in the age of digital?
Well, digital doesn't run itself. There's still a lot that needs done with digital. Of course, you can make up a playlist and let it run, and there can be no one in the booth for an entire week, and you can let that run. But you can notice when you go to the multiplex that it has just been sort of thrown together without any much due care at all. Whereas some places that still employ projectionists, mostly your art houses or independent cinemas, you notice a certain there's a certain stamp or a certain fingerprint on the performance, even on digital. So just like certain things like the lights coming up at the right time, or if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and stuff like this. But the kit always needs maintained, and there's always content to ingest and test. There's here at DCA we even sometimes you have to encode content as well, so making our own DCPs. So that takes up a lot of time as well. There's a lot more to it, doing things like presentations, Q&As, conferences, all the rest of it. I imagine the multiplex must probably struggle when people want to do private hires and stuff like that, because there's not people there with the skills just to do an audiovisual technical setup. So it's just things like that as well that projections are needed for these days. It's not just 35mm.
Because I think, well, projectionists, I can't remember who it was, but they once said that if I'm doing my job correctly, you don't know that I'm there, and it should be seamless. But it's certainly, I've had experiences at multiplexes many times when something's gone wrong, either it's the wrong film entirely or the lights haven't come down or something, and then you go out and you try to tell someone to fix it, and it's like, oh, I'll go get someone. And it's like trying to tell them what's wrong, and they kind of have this blank look on their face sometimes. They don't know what to do. You do still need someone in that position, I think, don't you, to oversee everything, because leaving it all to a duty manager when they've got a 10-screen multiplex to be looking after with hundreds of people coming in all the times, they can't be fully focused on that, surely.
Yeah, it's just not efficient to do things that way at all. If the duty manager has to run up to fix it, and then it's on to the front of the house staff to deal with all the customers when they should be the duty manager. So things just get thrown onto other people when they shouldn't be. As with digital, though, I mean, being there when something goes wrong is all well and good. But as with digital, as opposed to 35mm, there can be certain things that go wrong and you are unable to fix it. And then it could be a couple of days until you get an engineer out that knows how to fix it. Whereas 35mm, it's all mechanical really. So If you know your machine, then essentially you should be able to fix it pretty quick. But again, as with digital, there's not always that guarantee.
So looking to the future and stuff, we've these days a lot of the films you screen on 35mm will be old sort of rep screenings of old classic films, and I remember doing The Driver a couple of years ago at the Belmont, and it was an almost pink print to it, but sort of running it on and sort of seeing the film and running it through your fingers, you could almost sort of feel and see the history of the print, knowing that this is the print that has been going from cinema to cinema. You've sort of got that history, and that's what you kind of lose with digital. But why do you think it is that really only sort of filmmakers like Tarantino, Christopher Nolan, and occasionally maybe sort of Paul Thomas Anderson still have that sort of sway within the industry to arrange sort of runs of 35mm and 70mm prints beyond like a single print? They can actually send it out to multiple cinemas at once. What is it about those filmmakers you think that encourages that sort of screening?
I guess it's a combination of their personal passion and also their resources. They're very well funded filmmakers, so they are able to do this. But I mean, other Hollywood filmmakers, if they wanted to, I'm sure could as well. Like Spielberg, although I'm pretty sure that Ready Player One had a few 70mm prints kicking about as well. So there are bits of it, but these particular filmmakers, as I said, I think they're quite heavy on the technical side as well. If you look at their films, a lot goes into the cinematography of them as well. So I think particular things like that and again, it just comes back to their passion. I think how much they want to get things out there, and you're starting to get an effect of that onto independent filmmakers now. We just had Laszlo Nemes release Sunset on 35mm in the UK, and that went on a tour, and he came with it, chatting at 35mm. And we've got another one coming up, Mark Jenkins with Bates, is going to be getting a 35mm tour as well. So I think that effect of the big filmmakers like Tarantino and Nolan is making independent filmmakers and making them set up and think, I can actually get this out there. Maybe there might not be as many prints. There might even just be one print for the UK or something like that. But I think more people are trying to show their film the way they want it.
Yeah, and have you seen any sort of change in attitude from audiences? Because when I was started off in projection, it was all 35mm. If something went wrong, people would be screaming their heads off about the fact it's gone wrong. Whereas even just a couple of years later, if something went wrong with a print and you had to fix it or something, they'd kind of be more forgiving. It'd be like, oh, well, that's, the technology and stuff like that. Have you seen any sort of changes? Is it becoming the sort of vinyl of its age where people are seeking out, these types of screenings to see 35mm specifically as an art form?
Yeah, I think there is a certain section of the audience that does do that. Whether that's more cinephiles or not, I'm not sure. But there does seem to be a sort of misinformation about or a misguided view about what 35mm is. I think a lot of people think of it as vinyl. You think of the crackles on vinyl or whatever, and then people think about the scratches of film and all the marks and all the dirt and stuff like that. That's not what a 35mm print should look like when it's brand new, as you well know. So I think people have that sort of a bit of false nostalgia about it, that it should be all grainy and grubby. But no, it should be prime condition, and when it's fresh out of the can on its first run, far surpassing still what digital can do.
Yeah, I know it should look perfect, but it's all again down to the quality of the projectionists, because I remember the horror story of the Master on 70mm in Odeon Leicester Square, where they hadn't really gotten a proper projectionist for the first press screening and managed to scratch the first two reels. So again, it's all down to the quality of the person behind the projector as well. And now you've got sort of coming up a full run at the DCA of the new Tarantino film. Did you have to push hard to get that, or was it a case that the DCA were fully on board of doing this?
I guess it's been a collaborative sort of thing. Of course, as you know, projectionists don't do the programming; they just put on the film. But I mean, our head of cinema here is always open. I think to trying to screen on 35mm where we can. I mean, since I started in January, there's roughly been like one or two films a month, whereas previously there wasn't. And I guess that's just maybe simply having now two people in the booth that can do 35mm rather than just the chief projectionist before. So I've kind of strayed from your question there, I think, about the run. When we heard that it was going to be getting a 35mm release, we did obviously bring it up. But I guess it was sort of down to Sony and their release plans and how many prints they were striking as well. So when Sony said that we could have it, I think Alex, who's the head of cinema, just jumped on it, knowing that there were now two of us that we were able to facilitate a 2-week run.
Cool. And so, as a projectionist, why do you think people should see Once Upon a Time ... in Hollywood on 35mm rather than digital? What will it add to their experience?
It's, people have made comparisons to 35mm to various other forms of art. So I think for me, it's like the one about the painting. You want to go and see the painting as intended. You don't want to go and see a replica of a painting. You want to see the painting. So for me, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was shot on 35mm. That's the way it's going to be looked the best on the other side as well. It's going to look best on 35mm. So simply out of respect to the artist's intention and artist's wish for their film to be seen, then that's my main point of thought. Generally, just as I mentioned earlier, I truly believe that a brand new 35mm print contains greater depth of detail and clarity than digital does still currently.
Okay, cool. And two sort of final questions. One, if you could make up and screen a print of any film from the entire history of film, what would it be and why?
That's a difficult one because the one I'm thinking of, I'd also want to sit and watch it. I've never seen it on 35mm as well, which would be The Warriors.
Oh, that's an excellent choice.
I've seen it many times, but never in the cinema and never on 35mm. So I'd love to run it. I'd also love to watch it.
I know, because that's one of the sort of myths about sort of projection, whatever, is people think you just sit in the screen and watch movies all day. But unfortunately, with a 35mm print, especially these days with older prints, which may not be in the best condition, you can't just sort of sit and relax in the screen. You basically have to be by the projector the sort of whole time, don't you? And I believe, I think I read on your article about the DCA screening, you're going to be doing, is it reel-to-reel changeovers rather than sort of combining it all into one big reel, is that right?
Not 20 minutes to 20 minutes to 30 minutes. So the film will probably come in 8 or 9 reels perhaps. And we'll see, we're going to do either 2 spools or 3 spools, I think. So there will be some changeovers, yeah. Probably 2. So I think we'll get the film on 3.
Excellent, cool. And so that will be looking out for the old cigarette burns, as Tyler Durden would have said. So.
Or more misinformation. It was never a cigarette burn, but as we know, myths. Why not let it continue? I guess if people want to call it that.
Absolutely. And so the final question sort of leads on from that. But I guess now, as a full-time projectionist, have you ever been asked if you splice single frames of pornography into family films?
I don't know, but I think people do think the projectionists are weird creatures. I mean, we do sit in the dark mostly by ourselves for quite a lot of the day. So I think people wouldn't doubt it. But I don't know. I guess you'll need to come along and see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and keep your eyes open just in case. And you never know, you might see something you're not expecting.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you for your time, and I'll be looking forward. I'm coming down on the 16th of August to see it in all its glory, so I'll look for you in the tiny little window into the booth to see you in action. So
I'll be telling Rota, I don't think I'm doing your show, sadly, Dallas. I think Eden's going to be doing your show, but I might try and pop down anyway.
Awesome, great. Well, cheers. Thank you for your time. Thanks. Cheers.
Well, Dallas, good to talk to you. See you later.
So thanks to Cieran for joining us for that, and I hope that the rest of his run of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which they are screening on full shows a day at the Dundee Contemporary Arts Theatre, goes well for the next couple of weeks. But that brings us to the end of this episode. I think we're going to be back next week to delve into the past, shall we say, and looking back at I think we're going to party like it's 1999, aren't we, Lee?
Absolutely. This is an episode we've been discussing for a little while, so me, you, and Kim, I think, are going to have a lot of fun with this one.
Yeah, I've just been sort of briefly looking at what was released that year, and it's crazy the amount of really good films and also just silly films which I kind of enjoyed back in the day. I mean, if I rewatched a lot of them, they might be terrible, but I'm gonna keep the purple sort of rose tinted glasses on for that one. So it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. But if people want to speak to you about Tarantino and just maybe about 1999 in the run up to that, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Lee_Nostromo.
Cool, and you can catch me at @ChampCelluloid on Twitter and on Instagram as well. So we'll catch you then, and we'll speak to you next week when we go back to 1999. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd Party.